The scissors were the first thing Naomi Ishikawa reached for, and that told you everything about the kind of woman she was. There were 100 ways to hurt someone that morning, and she chose the one that would leave a mark you could see. That was the point, not the pain, the visibility of it. She wanted the whole household to know what had been done and who had done it, and how little anyone could do to stop her. The maid's name was Epha. She had been kneeling on the polished floor of the west sitting room for 40 minutes, cleaning a spill that was not hers, because Naomi had summoned her specifically and then arranged for tea to be knocked over specifically, so that there would be a reason. Naomi liked reasons. Reasons were what separated her from the people she considered beneath her, and she considered most people beneath her. And she considered this one, this African maid, 7 months pregnant, quiet, careful, unfailingly polite, beneath her most of all. Epha did not see the scissors until Naomi's hand was already in her hair. She had beautiful hair. That was, in the end, the whole crime. Long, thick, coiled tight, the kind of hair that took hours to care for and years to grow. The kind of hair her grandmother had taught her to tend before her grandmother died and left her with almost nothing else. Naomi gathered a fistful of it at the base of Epha's neck, and Epha felt the cold of the blades against her skin. And then she heard the sound. If you have never heard that sound made in Cruelty, you would not know how loud it is. Epha knew. She would remember it for the rest of her life. Before I take you any further into this, and I need you to be here for what happens to the woman holding those scissors, because she has no idea, none, what she has just set in motion. Stay with me, subscribe, and leave a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from tonight. This story is going to travel, and I want to see how far. Epha did not cry out. That was the thing several people noticed afterward. The ones who had gathered in the doorway the way people gather at the edges of Cruelty they are too afraid to interrupt. She did not scream. She did not beg. She knelt very still, with her hands folded over the curve of her belly, protecting the one thing in that room that mattered to her. And she let Naomi take her hair. Because there was nothing else she could do. And because she had learned, over a long life of being handed to people like Naomi, that the fastest way through a thing like this was to give it no fuel. Naomi wanted fuel. Naomi wanted tears. When they did not come, she cut more, and worse, hacking at it in uneven fistfuls, until the floor was covered, and Epha's head was a ruin of patches. And still the girl knelt there with her hands on her belly and her eyes fixed on the middle distance, and it was Naomi, in the end, who was breathing hard. "There," Naomi said. "Now you look like what you are." She dropped the scissors on the floor beside the hair. She left the room. The staff in the doorway scattered before her like birds. Epha stayed on the floor. One of the older maids, a woman named Yuki, who had worked the house for 30 years and had learned to see everything and say nothing, came and knelt beside her and began, very gently, to gather the hair from the floor. She did not know why she did it. It felt wrong to sweep it away like a mess. So she gathered it, handful by handful, into a cloth, and she folded the cloth and she pressed it into Epha's hands. "Keep it," Yuki said quietly. "Hair grows back. Let the growing back be yours to remember, not hers." Epha held the cloth. She looked at it for a long time. Then she got to her feet, slowly, one hand on the wall, and she straightened her uniform, and she went back to work. That was the thing about her that nobody in that house had ever bothered to understand. She always went back to work. She had cleaned their rooms and cooked their food and pressed their linens for 2 years without a single complaint, through morning sickness and swollen ankles and the particular exhaustion of carrying a child while being treated as though you were carrying nothing at all. She was, by any honest measure, the most capable person in that household. She simply happened to be the person that household had decided did not count. Funny thing about the people we decide don't count. We stop watching them, and you cannot see the ground shift under a person you have stopped watching. The master of the house was away. He had been in Nagoya for 11 days on a matter that his men did not discuss, and he was not expected back until the end of the week. His name was Rio Takahashi, and outside the walls of that house, it was a name spoken in a certain lowered register, the register people reserve for men who can end things. Inside the walls, to Naomi, he was simply the fiancé. The arrangement, the alliance, the ring on her finger that made her, in her own mind, already the mistress of the house and everyone in it. She had never asked how the maid came to be there. She had never once wondered why a man like Rio Takahashi kept a pregnant African maid in his household and instructed his entire staff, on pain of consequences he did not need to specify, that she was to be treated with care. Naomi did not wonder about things. Wondering was for people who were not certain of their place. Rio came home 2 days early. He did this the way he did most things, without announcement, without warning, arriving in the gray light before dawn, because he preferred to see his house as it was rather than as it arranged itself for him. He came in through the side entrance. Yuki was already awake, because Yuki was always awake, and she was the first person he saw. And she was standing very still in the corridor, with an expression on her face that he had learned over many years to read as trouble. "What happened?" he said. Yuki was not a woman who told tales. She had survived 3 decades in that house by knowing when to speak and when to disappear. But she looked at him, and she made a decision, and she told him, plainly, without decoration. The tea, the scissors, the 40 minutes on the floor, the hands folded over the belly, all of it. Rio did not say anything for a long moment. Then he asked very quietly, "Where is she?" "The kitchen, sir. She's already working." Of course she was. He found her at the long counter kneading dough for the morning bread, a scarf tied over what remained of her hair. She heard him come in, and she turned. And when she saw who it was, she went still, and her hand moved, that same reflex, to the curve of her belly. He saw the scarf. He understood what it was hiding. "Take it off," he said. "Sir, please." She untied it. She let it fall. And she stood there in the gray kitchen light with her ruined hair and her steady eyes, and she watched a man that the entire country was afraid of look at what had been done to her. And she watched something move across his face that she had never seen there before and could not name. He did not rage. That was what frightened the household later when they heard about it. They had all imagined, if this day ever came, that there would be shouting, breaking, the kind of violence the name Takahashi implied. There was none of that. He simply stood in the kitchen and looked at her for a long time, and when he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet that she had to lean toward it to hear. "Sit down," he said. "You've been on your feet since before dawn." "Sit." She sat. He pulled out the stool across from her, and he sat too. Which no master had ever done in that kitchen in living memory, and he was quiet for a while, and then he said the thing that changed everything, though it would take the rest of the household some time to understand what it meant. "You should never have been made to hide," he said. "That was my failure. I told them to protect you, and I did not tell them why, because I thought the why was mine to keep. I was wrong. I let them think you were no one. And a person they think is no one is a person they think they can do this to." Epha did not understand. Not yet. "The why?" she said. Rio looked at her. "Your husband," he said, was my brother. The kitchen was very quiet. Not by blood, he went on, by choice. By the oath that means more than blood in the life I lead. He stood at my side for 11 years, and he took a bullet that was meant for me. And he died in my arms on a wet street in Yokohama, telling me his wife was expecting a child he would never meet. Rio's jaw tightened, once, and then released. He asked me to see you safe. It was the last thing he ever asked anyone. And I have spent 7 months so afraid of failing him that I hid you in plain sight, and told my people to guard you without telling them what they were guarding. And in doing that, I made you into exactly the invisible thing that woman felt free to destroy. Ife's hands had gone to her belly again, but not in fear this time. She was holding on to something. Her eyes were bright. You knew him, she said. You knew Kaito. I loved him, Rio said simply. He was the best man I have ever known. And you are his wife, and that child is his child, and I have let you scrub my floors. He shook his head, slowly. That ends today. The thing about grief is that it recognizes itself. 2 people who loved the same person now sat across a kitchen counter in the pale light, and something passed between them that was older and quieter than anything Naomi and her scissors could have imagined. And it was not romance. Not then, not yet. It was recognition. The recognition of the only 2 people left in the world who knew exactly what had been lost. Rio did not go to Naomi that morning. He let her sleep. He was a patient man, and he had learned that the most complete corrections are the ones that are witnessed, and he wanted witnesses. He got them. The engagement dinner had been planned for weeks. Naomi had planned it herself, down to the flowers, because it was to be the formal announcement of the alliance between her family and the Takahashi name, and both families would be present, and the heads of 3 allied houses. And it was to be the night the whole world confirmed what Naomi already believed, that she had won, that she was chosen, that she stood at the top of a structure that most people spent their lives beneath. Rio let the dinner proceed. He let the guests arrive. He let Naomi glow at the head of the table in a dress that cost more than Ife earned in a year, accepting congratulations, accepting the deference of people who feared her fiancé and were learning to fear her. Then, between courses, he stood. The room quieted, the way rooms do when a man like that stands. Before we go further, Rio said, there is a member of this household I would like to introduce properly. Some of you have met her. None of you have met her as she deserves to be met. He looked toward the door. Yuki opened it. If came in. She had not wanted to. Rio had asked her, and she had said she did not want to be a spectacle, and he had said gently that it was not a spectacle he was after but a correction, and that she had every right to refuse and he would understand, but that if she could bear it, there was a woman in that room who needed to learn, in front of everyone she was trying to impress, exactly what she had done. So If came in. She was not in a uniform. Yuki and the other women had spent the afternoon on her, a good dress, quiet and dignified, and her hair, what was left of it, cut properly now, evened into a short crop that framed her face and looked. Everyone in that room realized with a lurch, entirely deliberate. She looked like a woman who had chosen it. She looked, in fact, beautiful. She rested one hand on the curve of her belly, and she walked to the head of the table, and she stood beside Rio. And Naomi's face, as she watched this happen, went through several colors and settled on none. This is Epha, Rio said. The widow of Kaito Nakamura, who died protecting my life, and who was closer to me than any brother of blood. This is his child she carries. She has been under my protection since his death, and under my roof and, to my lasting shame, treated by some in this house as though she were nothing. He let that sit. 2 days ago, he said, in my absence, someone in this room decided to cut off her hair while she knelt on the floor of my sitting room, 7 months into carrying the child of the man who died for me. The silence in that room was a physical thing. Naomi's family had gone very pale. The heads of the allied houses were looking at Naomi now, all of them, and their expressions were the expressions of men recalculating an alliance in real time. I do not raise my hand to women, Rio said. I never have. So I will not do to her what she did to Epha. But understand this. He turned and he looked at Naomi directly, and the whole room seemed to lean away from the line of his gaze. There will be no marriage. There will be no alliance. And the reason every person at this table will know by morning is not that she wronged a maid. It is that she looked at the widow of a fallen brother, a woman under the protection of this house, and she saw someone she was free to humiliate. A person who can do that is a person who understands nothing about what this house is, and a person who understands nothing about this house cannot be its mistress. He said it without heat. That was what made it final. Naomi stood. Her hands were shaking. She opened her mouth, and for one moment it looked as though she might defend herself, might turn it around, might find some version of the story in which she was the wronged one. She was that kind of woman. She had always found that version before. But she looked around the table, and she saw that there was no one in that room who would help her hold it, and the version died in her mouth. She left. Her family left with her, in the particular silence of people who have just watched a fortune walk out the door because of something small and cruel that could so easily not have been done. Rio turned to Epha. I'm sorry, he said quietly, just to her, though the room could hear. For all of it, from the first day. You should have been a guest in this house from the moment you arrived. Not a servant, never that. I've looked at him. There were tears on her face now, finally, the tears that had not come when the scissors did. Because it is not cruelty that breaks us, in the end. It is being seen. It is being finally, fully, publicly seen, after so long of being invisible, that undoes a person completely. He talked about you, she said. Kaito, he said if anything ever happened, you would come. I didn't believe him. I'm sorry. I didn't believe anyone would come. I came late, Rio said, but I came. He did not marry her that night, or that year. Grief does not work on a schedule, and neither does trust, and both of them had too much respect for the man they had lost to rush toward each other over his memory. But he moved her into the family rooms the next morning. The child, a boy, was born in the autumn, and Rio held him within the hour and wept without embarrassment, because the boy had his father's brow, and there are some resemblances a strong man does not pretend not to feel. The household changed after that. Word travels in a world like that one, and the word that traveled was simple. The widow was not to be touched, not to be slighted, not to be looked at sideways, because the man at the top of everything had made her his family and would make her, in time, his wife. He did, eventually, years on, in a small ceremony, with a boy old enough by then to carry the rings. She wore her hair short still. She had kept it that way on purpose, all those years. When people asked, she told them the truth, that a cruel woman had once tried to take it from her to make her small, and had instead handed her the exact moment her whole life turned. She kept it short to remember that. Not the cruelty, the turning. There is an old idea that the worst thing a person can do to you defines you. It does not. What defines you is what you were already becoming, while they were busy trying to make you less. Naomi cut a kneeling woman's hair to prove that woman was nothing. She only proved how little she understood about who kneels, and why, and what rises when they finally stand. The quiet ones are not weak. They are simply waiting to be seen. And heaven help the person holding the scissors on the day the world finally looks.